And welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you would like to send me an email, it's the same email address I've had for 30 years, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, to find out about the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Visit www.xzbn.net. And for the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV Channel 21, www.simultv.com. And every Tuesday night here in the Hamilton, Toronto area, we are on Cable 14 at 9:30 every Tuesday night. My guest this hour is Brad Bradley, and Brad began his working career as a chemist fresh out of college with the West Virginia Air Pollution Control Commission. He then moved on as an analytical chemist at Union Carbide Corporation. Upon merging with Dow Chemical Corporation, they saw it fit to make him a laboratory information technology site expert, which later led to his career as a distant learning coordinator. Union Carbide and then Dow Chemical also trained him in facilitation, team building, Six Sigma, and Apollo root cause analysis, among many other subjects. He is currently a systems manager for a state government agency. Now, Brad became interested in the paranormal research after attending a public event where he saw something he just could not explain. He then became research coordinator for the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation, which is his current role. Now, for information on the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation, visit their website at www.centerpri.org and on Facebook, /VACPRI. Joining me now is Brad Bradley. And Brad, welcome to the X-Zone.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let me ask you, Brad, what was that event or that something you couldn't explain at that event that you went to see that started you on your journey into the paranormal?
Well, I was a big fan of a popular ghost hunting TV show at the time, and I just liked watching the show and the interaction between the characters and such. And I was a huge skeptic during that time period.
Right.
And my wife got me tickets to go meet the folks from the show at an inn they owned up in New Hampshire. And lo and behold, while I was at that event, I saw something like a full-formed figure walk between me and the window in the room we were standing in, and it was nobody there. That's what did it.
And what happened after that? How did you keep pursuing the interest in the paranormal, and how did you end up with the Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation?
Well, it just so happens that our organization is a member of the TAPS family, and TAPS is the Atlantic Paranormal Society. We're a member of that family, and they're affiliated with the Ghost Hunters TV show. And I was speaking with Grant Wilson up there at that inn, who was part of that TV show, and he told me that I needed to get in touch with this particular group because he knew who they were, and that they were, they basically pursued what I was after. And so I got in touch with Bobby Atterstein, our president,
right?
And she is the one that told me, it's like, yep, we need somebody like you. You're a chemist. Come on board. And then I started doing coordinating all the research projects from the organization because I have that kind of skill set. And there you go.
Now, what can a chemist contribute to a paranormal investigation?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, besides the fact that, I mean, as a chemist, I typically, dealt with chemicals and such, but,
sure.
Also, I was taught the different analytical skills, basically like, not just the scientific method, but experimental design, that kind of stuff. And we apply all that in the center now on most of our research projects that we do. We have a theory, we design an experiment to look at the theory, we then move on and we perform the experiment, gather the data, draw our conclusions. If we need to change the experiment, we do that. And it's evergreen process. It's over and over again.
So, what have you discovered so far?
Well, we've found out several things. You know, a lot of people, you know, they talk about what they call residual haunts.
Right.
And what I decided to do was, you know, I thought that what I saw at this inn might be residual. So what I started doing is designing an experiment where, you know, I noticed there was a bit of an environmental change in the room when this happened as well. I just felt it. So what I decided to do was to see if I could measure that environmental change when people perceive something visually or audibly that they might consider paranormal, and try and do some correlation there. And over time, we've gathered thousands and thousands of data points over this, and it's beginning to look like there might actually be, for a residual haunt, there might actually be a natural cause for this. You know, we haven't, you know, determined what that cause is, but it seems to be pointing that direction. Where, you know, we found out that also if you treat like a perceived manifestation as a point source, all the environmental stuff that happens around that point source only radiates about 3 or 4 feet from that point source. So if your sensors aren't within that 3 or 4 foot radius, you don't get anything. So we also found that out as well. And you know, we've determined also that there seems to be a shift in magnetic field, geomagnetic field, mind you, along with a spike in ionizing radiation when these things occur.
Now, if the instrumentation has to be within 3 to 4 feet of the data point, does that mean if a person is standing outside of that 3 to 4 foot data point area, that they will not encounter that paranormal experience?
It's possible. We have noticed that there will be people standing side by side, you know, like 3 or 4 feet apart,
Sure.
and one person will hear something and the person standing next to them won't.
Well, could that just be because of the hearing capabilities that person A has compared to person B?
Could be. We don't know that for sure. We just know that anecdotally we've seen that occur. But for the most part, though, you know, we have. For the most part, we've run into where everybody in the room heard it, but the sensors didn't pick up anything because they weren't anywhere near it. But like we might have one sensor that was near it and it picked up something, whereas the other sensors did not. So at that point, we think that that's why we're thinking that there's a finite radius to that environmental effect.
But if everyone in the room heard it, it didn't register on that piece of equipment. How do you explain that?
Well, it could be picked up audibly. It's the environmental changes we were looking at weren't picked up, because you have to think the environmental changes we're looking at are temperature, barometric pressure, humidity, vibration,
Sure,
and that kind of thing. And when we're looking at that, we we can hear things without having, we don't have to have an environmental change. Like right now, you're hearing me.
Yes.
So we don't have an environmental change around that per se. But what we're noticing is when somebody hears something or somebody sees something around that point source, there is a change in those parameters that I just laid out for you.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of problems following this.
Okay.
Well, in your opinion, what do the atmospheric or the other changes have to do with the person hearing a sound? I don't understand this.
Not a thing. Basically, what we think is going on is that whatever is causing the manifestation is producing the environmental effects. So those environmental effects don't affect the people that are hearing or seeing it at all. We're just using them as a detector, the people as a detector, to say I see something or I hear something.
Well, in your opinion, and I've got to say, I just let me come back to you on the other side of this break, because I don't want to.
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt you. All right, stand by. Bradley is our guest this hour. www.centerpri.org and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Are you a skeptic or are you a believer? Either way, let me know. Send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Brad Bradley and I return on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Brad Bradley is our special guest this hour, www.centerpri.org, and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. Before we went to the break, we were talking about how certain instruments need to be within 3 to 4 feet of a data point in order for it to register any changes. Now, if people are hearing a sound, and yet nothing is being registered on the equipment, how do we know then that the sound is actually affecting the environment and is going to change settings?
Well, basically, when you look at it statistically, when you have all these data points and you do the big data analysis, just throwing all this stuff into Microsoft Excel or something like that, and you perform the standard data analysis on something, looking for outliers and such, it just points to the fact that it just seems like there's a finite radius to the environmental effects around that point source. And because if we we have one sensor that picks up something, and the exact same kind of sensor 4 feet away does not. That tells us right there, and we have hundreds of those that we picked up. And if you look at it like in the grand scheme of things, say you have a ghost standing in the corner, let's say, and I'm just saying ghost in the colloquial sense, but you have a ghost standing in this corner, and then all of a sudden, they move, or they make the appearance, let's say, and the sensors in the corner, will pick up whatever's going on, but the one 3 or 4 feet away does not, and then the one 3 or 4 feet past that does not, and that kind of stuff. It really plays out as if you have it's like Battleship, the game Battleship, pretty much. And you're really it's hit and miss where you're going to get this kind of information. We've been able to really blanket a room with sensors, and sure enough, we'll get a block of sensors here that say something's going on when the sound happens, but none of the other sensors in the room pick it up. So we do have that evidence.
All right, so if other people are in the room, and everyone here in the room hears the sound, what's the significance of this? Could it just mean that certain frequencies are inaudible to certain pieces of equipment, and this is what you're getting with true and false readings?
Well, it's you got to look at what we're actually measuring.
Well, what are you measuring?
We're measuring temperature and barometric pressure, and we're measuring light levels, ultraviolet light levels, infrared light levels, different things like that. And it's entirely possible for something like that to happen in a finite area, like especially temperature and barometric pressure, ionizing radiation, changes in geomagnetic field, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff can happen in a finite area. Whereas if you're outside that area, you're not going to experience it just by the sheer nature of especially geomagnetic field, because it drops off in an exponential waveform out away from the point source.
Is it possible that these environmental changes have nothing to do with the paranormal, that these are all these are all naturally occurring phenomena.
Well, it's possible. I mean, what we've got though is it's highly probable that that these are related to whatever that perceived manifestation is, based on how the experiment was designed and where the location of the sensors and what we were measuring and that kind of thing.
What is the ultimate goal of these experiments?
Well, right now we're trying to figure out what exactly are residual manifestations and what is causing the residual manifestation, because everybody thinks of them as a recording,
right?
On the environment.
Yeah.
And also in collecting all this data, we didn't just run into residual stuff. We ran into interactive stuff, and while we were recording this data, and that totally throws that experiment out the window, because you can't perform the same experiment on interactive as you do on residual, because residual is reproducible, interactive stuff is not. So that's we've kind of defined this experiment to where we're only looking at the residual stuff that we ran into, and sometimes we may have actually captured something that wasn't residual but was interactive, but we easily could have mistaken it for residual or vice versa. But we've gotten enough data points to where, when you have a huge number of data points like this, you can go in and when you do the statistics, it just jumps right at it. The trends are all there, the outliers are all there, everything, all the anomalies are there.
But what happens if the statistical analysis has nothing to do with the actual paranormal event? Like, you're talking about data points, you're talking about statistics. How about hard evidence?
Well, when you have a recorded sound or a recorded video of something that occurs, there's the what they might call anecdotal evidence. It's like something happened. We now know that something happened. Or if somebody in the room had a personal experience, we know something happened. And at that point, if something happened, that's when we look at all the sensors and see which ones pinged and which ones didn't. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, and based on where those ones pinged, we also can do a sound mapping of a room and determine the area where the sound was. So wherever the sound was, if the sensors the sound mapping, the audio mapping of the room, the sound came from. At that point, we have a really good correlation, so we consider that positive test results.
With all the paranormal groups that are out there these days, just in Southern California, there's over 3,000, and all these people that have been doing this for years and years and years, there's been no concrete evidence to substantiate any claims. How come? Well,
it could be that these folks aren't really approaching it like they need to. It could be because we've actually collected data, hard data. The kind of data you can hand off to a physicist or
I understand the importance about data, but what about evidence? Data is one thing. Let's get away from the analytical side here. Let's get down to the brass tacks. What evidence is there? Physical evidence. Not anecdotal evidence, but real hardcore evidence. Is there any?
Well, how do you define hardcore evidence? Because for us, hardcore evidence is the data, is the sensor readings. Because we collect those over time.
Right, but you don't.
When they change and when they don't.
You don't know what is causing those sensor readings. So until you establish what is causing the sensor readings, that is just data. It is not. It's analytical fact, yes, but it's not physical evidence.
Well, how you actually perform an experiment, though, Rob, is you have to start with the theory. The theory is that whatever's making the noise or whatever's visualizing out there is going to change the environment. That's the theory. And as soon as we started with that, we collected the data around that and said, well, yeah, there is an environmental effect. We know that. That is fact. And we have whenever there's an audible, whenever we hear something or we see something that is of the paranormal, we know that there's an environmental effect around it.
Okay, so how do you know if it's paranormal or if it's just an unknown anomaly that occurs naturally and has nothing to do with the paranormal.
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you, is it's starting to look like that the residual type stuff is caused by nature.
Okay, it makes a lot of sense since we're, the electromagnetic fields, and being in audio and broadcasting, we know that the old analog tapes, they had to be really scrubbed very well by a demagnetizer, or else we'd get what we used to call ghost whispers on the tape that we would use again.
Yeah, I mean, we have a, right now in regards to magnetic fields, we're just kind of looking at geomagnetic fields. But yeah, I mean, it pardon me, I'm going to get a drink of water here. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that as you collect that information, even with magnetic field or audio tapes or videotapes or still pictures or whatever, as you collect all that information, those are just pieces of the puzzle as part of the experiment. And then eventually you're going to come up to the point where you're able to have a theory about causation.
Is
and
it?
Then we,
we've got to take a break shortly, so I'll let you grab your glass of water. But is it possible that the established scientific methods that we have today are not going to discover the answers that everybody wants, because everybody is thinking inside of the box instead of getting outside of the box and looking at the phenomenon? Is it possible?
It's possible. I mean, if people are looking for a spiritual answer, there's no way to get that answer based on the standard scientific method.
All right, Brad, stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Brad Bradley is our guest. www.centerpri.org, and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Brad Bradley is our guest this hour. www.centerpri.org, and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. What is the importance of the investigation into the residual haunting compared to the, the spontaneous apparitions or the spontaneous hauntings that happen?
You mean like the interactive type stuff? Moving objects, being touched, that kind of thing.
Well, I wouldn't call that interactive, but yeah, I guess that's what it's classified in the biz as. What's the significance? Why do you want to spend so much time on the residuals?
Well, we got to start somewhere, and that to somebody that's a hard scientist or even a soft scientist like a psychologist or a sociologist, that's low-hanging fruit. You can actually measure it. It tends to be reproducible. It's perfect for that kind of experiment. So we want to go in, and if we can figure out what's happening residually, then we can go ahead and set that off to one side, and then move over to the spontaneous apparitions or the when they actually something might actually say your name, or you might get touched, or something might move, like a door open and shut or something like that. Then you can move on to that kind of thing, which is a radically different thing than the residual side. Okay.
So how close do you think you are to coming up with a hypothesis?
Well, right now, seems like, initially we were trying to determine if the manifestations cause the environmental effects, or if environmental effects cause the manifestation.
Right.
That's the first thing we had to do. And now it looks like that the manifestations, the data is pointing at the fact that the manifestations are causing the environmental effects. So now we need to figure out what's causing the manifestations. You know, the where you see the same person walk through a door every night at the same time, or you know, you hear the same sound every night at the same time, or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. The reproducible kind of residual haunts. We need to figure out what's causing that.
Sure. Let me ask you this: when you say the same time every night, what happens when there's a shift in the time? For example, from daylight saving to, Eastern, for example.
Well, that's why we go with the UTC or Greenwich Mean Time. I mean, we stick with that, and we do all of our measurements using an atomic clock, and that way, you know, we're down to the 10th of the second in accuracy, in precision. And not accuracy, sorry. And then that way we have a really good handle on when these things really occur. And, you know, sometimes, though, it's not exactly the same time every time, and it's not every night and that kind of thing. I was just using an example.
Right. So how can that be a residual if there is a difference in times or a difference in days?
Well, it's not interactive. That much is certain.
Well, it's not interactive, but aren't you trying, am I misunderstanding that what we're looking at is trying to discover, using all these data points, what these perpetual hauntings are all about, these apparitions that seem to have a time schedule? You know, why would there be a difference in time? Why would certain days be missed if, in fact, it's a residual? Well,
if let's say that whatever's causing it isn't able to cause the manifestation, depending on what the let's say the environment of the room is, or that kind of stuff. We've seen where if we aren't in the room and we're measuring this stuff remotely, and we're watching it from our HQ area 300 feet away or something like that, you know, we found that it happens it can happen very reproducibly. And as soon as we walk into that room, it'll stop. We've seen that time and time again. And that indicates that we've just disrupted something. And we're not sure what that is yet, and we think that has to do with the causation, so that's why we're designing new experiments around here to see what's going on.
What do other members of the scientific community say about your experiments?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, a lot of people don't even know about it. We try to, we put it out on our website, we put it out on our Facebook page, we deliver lectures at various locations, and there are people out there that are very interested. But then again, there's the people that don't think we should be looking at this at all because they think it's nonsense, and then these residual haunts don't exist, or these interactive haunts don't exist, and that kind of thing. So you're always going to have those people.
Is it possible that those who believe will experience these events, and those who don't believe for one reason or another, because they have no interest, will not experience these events, even if they're in the same room when the event is actually happening?
Well, funny you would say that, because there are actual psychological experiments that have been performed outside of this organization, where two people in a room will hear something, and one person is very attuned to what they're hearing, so they're picking up on it, and they can tell exactly what's going on, and they're like excited, they're excited about it or what have you. Then the person sitting next to them didn't hear anything, and then that person, though they actually did, but they tuned it out as noise. And there are people like that. You know, they think that they automatically, their brain is configured such that they just write it off, and it's something that they don't need to worry about. So it just goes into the back bin somewhere, and then later on they're like, yeah, I might have heard something. I'm not sure, even though it was loud and really clear to the person standing next to them.
Now, does this sound get recorded where it can actually be played back to the person who didn't hear it?
Yes. And it was real interesting. I can't remember the book that this came out of, but the experiment was very detailed. and it was done by a university, and they basically had a guy sitting there, and another guy sitting, 10 feet away from him, and they played the sound in the room. They had normal sounds in the room, like air conditioning sounds and stuff like that. Then they played a sound in the room that sounded like a voice, and one person heard it and locked in on it, and the other person didn't. And that's because that person's, the way their brain's configured, they just went ahead and tuned it out. So we could be missing stuff all day long, all the time, and not even realize it.
But at the end of the day, how will this change the way we live? How will this change any of the stress that a lot of us are facing on a daily basis? How will this work to better humanity?
To tell you the truth, in regards to finding out about the residual stuff, it's going to, a lot of people are afraid of this stuff. And so, there are people that work in some environments, and when this residual stuff happens, they quit. This is just an example, mind you. And they might quit, or they might, they might say they have to move to a different building because the stuff's going on around them, and they're scared.
Right.
So, finding out exactly what it is might help, mitigate the fear, and eventually maybe mitigate the actual manifestations themselves if it's really natural, mind you. Now, if it's, in regards to interactive stuff, like I told you before, we haven't even started experimenting for that stuff yet. We just know it's there because we've all experienced it.
Right.
And it's just something, though, that doesn't fit in the same bin as the residual stuff. It's real obvious that it doesn't.
How much of this haunting, residual, or any other kind can be put to mind over matter? Because you want to believe, because you want to have the experience?
Well, now you're talking telekinesis.
No, I'm not talking about telekinesis. I'm talking about people who investigate the paranormal. If you confess it, you will possess it. Or mind over matter. They hear what they want to hear. They see what they want to see. They experience what they want to. How much of this could possibly be the answer that people really don't want to acknowledge and face?
Well, that's entirely true, and that plays right into that same psychological experiment I just talked about. The thing that we're trying to do too, and what we're doing with this current line of experimentation is we're trying to eliminate that variable altogether. We're recording everything. If we hear the anomaly, we don't try to figure out what it's saying. We don't try to figure out who the thing is. We just know we have an anomalous sound or an anomalous picture or video, and then we know that that's what we've got, and that's our manifestation.
What would you consider an anomalous picture?
Well, we tend not to look at a lot of pictures people send us because it's too easy to fake those pictures.
Sure.
It's just way too easy.
Yep.
So, but if we're standing in the room and we see something with our own two eyes, and we take a picture of that we saw, and if multiple people saw it, and we took a picture of it and multiple people saw it, then that picture would be considered a picture of an anomaly. And so we actually could use that. That doesn't happen very often because we tend to rely more on video and audio than still pictures.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our final break. Exonation, Brad Bradley's our guest this hour, www.centerpri.org, and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. I'll be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Welcome back. Bradley is our special guest this hour. His website is centerpri.org, and on Facebook, facebook.com/VACPRI. When the CPRI goes out and conducts a paranormal investigation, how is it done?
Well, first, we what I do is I coordinate the actual research projects, not the going to the house because somebody called us and said they have a ghost. So how I do my part is I basically we're looking for a location that has activity that's going to meet the the parameters of what we're looking for and trying to experiment with, and then we design an experiment around whatever theory we're getting ready to test, and we run the experiment at the location, collect all the information, try to draw some kind of conclusion, and then we move on from there. Now, when somebody calls us or sends us a help request, and we go to that location, we try to look at what those people say they're experiencing, and then we try to design experiments around that so that we can run those quickly and easily at the location that the people where they say they're experiencing activity. So there's two different ways we handle this.
But isn't the object of these people calling you to, they obviously want help? How do they get the help if, you're doing scientific experiments?
Well, what we do is we preface it up front when they contact us and tell them that we're not going to be able to tell them if there's a real like a dead person haunting their house, or we're not going to be able to give them a name. We're just going to be able to tell them that something's going on. And we don't, in regards to help, if they need more help beyond that, we're going to refer them elsewhere. Because that's, when we go to places, we tend to have, police officers, the nurses, doctors, those kind of folks that go on these home visits, so that we can actually look at the environment around the place and make sure that there's nothing, naturally going on there that's causing whatever issue they're having.
Why would somebody call a paranormal research group instead of calling their local city engineer to have the engineers come out to do a site analysis before calling you folks?
And it's funny you should ask that too, because people want to think there is something else out there. They want to think that there's this banging in my wall. I know it can't be a mouse, or it can't be a rat, or it can't be a pipe. It's got to be my dead grandpa. And then they go and they automatically assume that. Whereas when we go in there, the first thing we're going to look for is that rat or mouse or animal activity or the pipe in the wall or what have you. And that's the first thing we're going to look for. So these folks just want to believe that there's something going on that's just a little bit out of their control. They've got a little bit of control, but it's just a little bit out of their control, and that gives them some sort of excitement. And that happens a lot. There's an article that was just on one of the major news networks. It could be CNN or one of those other ones, but they actually talk about this very thing.
So let me ask you this. What kind of influence do all these so-called reality TV shows have on these people experiencing the sounds and the sights that they truly believe are paranormal because they've watched a TV show that, in all aspects, are anything but real? How does this play into the paranormal scenario these days?
Well, it makes everyone an expert, and that's a shame because there are very few of those. And everybody thinks that they know what's going on. Look at the number of teams like you're talking about, down in Southern California. Thousands and thousands and thousands. They all think that they, based on doing what they see on TV, they want to experience something just to know that they can experience it, and it's commendable, which is fine, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And it's also not going to help the people that you say you're helping. As a matter of fact, if you misinterpret something that's actually natural in the house, you could almost be called up and be called negligent at that point. and that brings you into legal type stuff. So you don't. I mean, when you're performing research, you're just collecting data and you're trying to draw conclusions, and that's all you're doing. If you go out there and you say you're going to help somebody find out if there's a demon in their house, you are grossly negligent. I'm sorry.
Then how are they able to get away with this? How come there's
nobody's holding them accountable?
Why not?
I don't know. I wish I knew, but I do know there are little bits and pieces you hear now and then of these teams that are saying stuff like that. Like they go into a location and the person in the location is mentally unstable, and they tell this person they have a demon in their house, and the person tries to kill themselves because of it. And they do that, but they just don't think anything of it because they don't realize the dangers of it. That's why we try to enlist some of our mandatory reporters down here in the States to help out with these home visits like that. We don't do a lot of those, but when we do, we really focus on that particular item.
I understand that you've also done research within the field when it comes to radiation. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. One of the parameters we started measuring was radiation because we, when you're doing these research projects in these houses that were built in the 1600s and 1700s and you're in the basement, there's a real good chance you're going to run into radon. And so what we decided to do was to try to start using Geiger counters to measure radiation and get dosage down in those basements and stuff. Well, what we found out was when there was like if we ran the Geiger counter near some of our other sensors and there was one of those anomalous noises or that kind of thing, and all those sensors went off, we ended up doing getting a spike in ionizing radiation, which is gamma radiation, alpha, beta, gamma, that kind of thing. The kind of things that causes changes in materials, like you get from Fukushima or something like that. We saw spikes, and these spikes were considerable. They weren't small spikes. Say the background radiation was 15 counts per minute. It would jump all the way up to 60 and 70 counts per minute, and come right back down again. It wouldn't stay. So we're trying to figure out what's going on there. And at the same time we get those spikes, we get a shift in the geomagnetic field on all three axes, because magnetic field's measured in three axes. And so we're like, holy cow, what's going on here? So that's what we're looking at now. We're trying to focus on those sensors more than the other ones, trying to figure out how that can happen, because that naturally occurring, you can't get spikes like that. Typically radiation goes up, it kind of stays for a while, and then it might gradually come back down again. It doesn't spike, like go straight up and back down within seconds.
So what do you do with this information when it comes to something that could be harmful to the inhabitants of the house that you come up with during your research?
Well, we let them know, and it's like, listen, you've either got some bad wiring causing really high electromagnetic fields in your house at the 60 hertz range. We tell them that because they need to do something about it, because they might end up with a fire or something like that. So we go ahead and give them all that information, and we document that we give it to them. And if we detect, like, say we do pick up a lot of standing radiation in their basement area or something like that, we might let them know they might want to get a radon test done, that kind of thing. So we do let them know these differences.
Do you let the municipalities know that you've come up with these readings and that there could be a possible problem?
That's entirely up to the property owner.
But if you know this and the property owner doesn't do something, and something happens to the property owner, isn't that negligence on your part?
Not really. Not in the eyes of the law. What we've done is we've given the information.
You get a release signed?
And if they choose not to do something with it, then they're the ones that are negligent.
We've
given them all the information.
Do you get a release signed?
Yes.
So you
here's the information. We've warned you that there's a problem, and you need to do something about it. Here's an example of people you need to contact from the city or from the county that can help you. And if you choose, if you choose not to do something about it, it's your own fault.
We've got about 45 seconds left, Brad. How can someone contact your organization if they'd like to have you guys do an experiment in their house?
Well, basically, you can contact. The best way is either you can contact me at brad@virginiaghosts.com, or you can go to our Facebook page, and there's an actual form you can fill out to give us more information. It's like it says request help or something like that.
Brad, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Great talking to you. And Exonation, if you'd like to get more information about Brad or the CPRI, once again, their website is centercpri.org, and on Facebook, it is facebook.com/VACPRI. I'll be back on the other side of this break with most networks and affiliates, but if I'm not, remember, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone.